So for the first time since 1978, letter carriers have rejected a tentative agreement on their labor contract that only offered a 1.3% wage gain. So what does that mean? Well, that means the National Association of Letter Carriers, our union, has till Wednesday, February 19th to reach an agreement with USPS for a fair contract. If there's no agreement reached, we will go to arbitration since federal workers cannot strike in the U.S. Today, February 16th, the South Macomb letter carriers of Branch 4374 hosted a Fight Like Hell kickoff event to join in solidarity and bring more attention to our fight for a fair contract, higher wages, a one-table system, an all-career workforce, and to oppose privatization of the post office and to protect our letter carriers since there has been a recent epidemic of letter carriers getting robbed and assaulted. Here's what the event looked like.
What are we going to do?
Fight like hell!
What are we going to do?
Fight like hell!
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody here right now, you are the beginning of the leaders of the rank and file of the branch. All of you will make a difference on what the leaders are going to end up doing. And I commend everybody here because you all deserve more. You work real hard. And what you want is it's yours. Don't ever feel it's not yours. It's something you have to fight for because nobody's going to give you nothing in this world. Okay?
Good morning and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. Here we have a unusual episode. We had the Macho Mailman, where we introduced an extraordinary letter carrier we knew and talked about what he did. And here we are again. We're going to do the same thing. And I think this individual is incredible. I know him personally. I think he's really artistic. He's great at what he does. And it doesn't mean much for me to talk about him because he knows himself better than him. So would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Eric Kiska. I'm a letter carrier in Sterling Heights, Michigan, and I'm also a fellow member of NALC Branch 4374, just like Josh here.
And for anybody who's listening who somehow doesn't understand, because this is mostly going to be posted on my accounts, I'm the Roseville Wrecking Ball, Joshua Shrum, and I got a podcast called Parcels of Knowledge. So if you stumble onto my YouTube or whatever media that my counterpart here might post it to, then that's where you find me. So let's talk about you. What do you do that sets you apart from a lot of other individuals, and what projects do you have going on that could be interesting to the listeners?
For sure, yeah. So I run a YouTube channel called Fire Lake Media. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram, but basically my YouTube channel is mostly centered on Great Lakes history. I have a whole series on there called Tales of the Great Lakes, and basically I've covered everything from the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald to the wreck of the SS Kamloops, and then my most recent video was called Milwaukee's Jones Island, how a fishing village turned into a sewage peninsula, and it was about these Polish immigrants that moved to Milwaukee, and they started squatting on this one island in Milwaukee and became fishermen. And eventually Milwaukee had to kick them out. And it was this whole fight between these Polish immigrants and Milwaukee. And so I like to feature interesting tales like that on my YouTube channel. But I'm also working on a feature-length documentary called The Power of the Newspaper, Detroit in the 1960s, which will be about how Detroit's two major newspapers, the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News, covered the 1960s and that very pivotal era in Detroit's history. And I wear a lot of hats too. The other thing I do is called A24 on the Rocks, where it's a film review podcast that you can find on any podcatcher. And we review films from the film studio A24, and they're kind of like an indie film studio. They have a lot of big names for horror films. They did Hereditary, Midsummer, Pearl, and X, just like a lot of films that horror fans love. So if you're into that kind of cinema, then you might enjoy that podcast. But yeah, those are kind of the big things I'm doing production-wise. And then I produce a lot of small snippets on my channel too, like of a minute or less. I do like history snippets on there, but I I am taking classes at Go Comedy in Ferndale, where I do improv comedy. And so I'm trying to feature some sketch comedy on my channel too. So I'm kind of all over the place on there, but my main thing is I create content. So yeah.
All right. So man, you gave me a lot of information there. Let's talk about some of these things individually, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you heard that error message, but my brain was going all over the place. What is your fascination with history? Is there anything particular? Because my carriers that normally listen to me, they love facts. They love historical information sometimes. So do you share that inclination?
Oh, totally. I love how history has shaped our modern world, and I love figuring out how history has shaped our modern world. And the old adage is history repeats itself, but I think it rhymes and it doesn't repeat. I think Ken Burns said that. But
yeah.
I love just kind of, seeing history back in the day and seeing how it relates to us today.
You know, it's funny. I was going to put that line in my podcast today. History doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes, and that's funny you bring that up. Now, I've personally witnessed your own historical videos, and like you said, they related to Michigan and the Great Lakes and all these other things. Where can people find historical context? What would they have to look up on TikTok or whatever other platform you have in order to find that? Is that Fire Lake Media?
Yeah, Fire Lake Media, which is like fire as in fire, Fire, Lake, Lake, and media, Media. Fire Lake Media, all no spaces. And you can find that TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. Yep.
Now, where'd you come up with that name? Is it special in particular, or?
Yeah, well, I grew up. I like definitely would go up north a lot in Michigan, and we would have a lot of bonfires by the lake. And also, then I ended up going to Northern Michigan University up in the Upper Peninsula, and there I would have a lot of bonfires on the lake, and we would often tell stories to each other, me and whoever else I was with, and I kind of had this idea of like telling stories around a campfire setting and that kind of picture of Michigan, that kind of romantic notion of just the lake, a fire, and a story. And I wanted to name myself related to that because I just felt it captured the notion of what I'm going for.
All right, that's pretty cool. I'm sure that many people find that interesting. There's a lot of people like Alan Gigax who like to hike, and that sounds like something that a lot of people enjoy to get themselves away from the hectic post office. Now, what about your documentary? Can you go more into detail about what exactly is going on, when can we expect it, and where can we find it?
Yeah, it'll be on my YouTube channel, Fire Lake Media, and I've been filming this the last year. My dad is also involved, and my dad is a professor at U of M Dearborn and a professor of history, so I also get my love of history from him. But he was a former journalist for the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press, and basically he had a lot of connections in the journalism world, and we thought it'd be interesting in our modern age of social media and how people get news today. Like, it's so much different than how people got news in the 1960s. And we wanted to really feature and showcase just how much power the newspapers had in the 1960s and how it was a real true source of information for people. Like nowadays people, they get their information from, a majority get their information from social media and podcasts. But honestly, these places are filled with misinformation. And not to crap on podcasts or anything, because there's plenty that provide very good information. But there's also a lot that literally they don't have to fact check anything. They don't have to source anything. They just they read something online like anybody else, and then they share it amongst their followers. And I grew up with a great respect for journalism and how journalists actually have to source their information and talk to people and figure out information as it's happening. And I wanted to really showcase to people just how a newspaper did that in a a decade of such turmoil, Vietnam, civil rights movement, everything going on in the 1960s, and how the newspapers covered that. And yeah, that was our idea for the documentary. And we interviewed probably like 7 or 8 people, historians and journalists, and we're splicing it up with old like documentary footage and old pictures. And yeah, I'm very inspired by Ken Burns, I'd say. And so if you think of a Ken Burns documentary, I think this will be the same kind of style of documentary.
Yeah, boy!
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for it. So, yeah, that's going to be something to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have it out by April, by the way. So I'm almost done editing it, actually, but we want to actually have a big premiere, hopefully at the Detroit Historical Museum in Detroit. And we'll have a premiere, and then I'll put it up on my YouTube channel. So that's our idea.
I know. So basically, that you do this extra thing, does it give you a distraction from what's going on in the postal world? Are you feeling all the scenery? Because we're actually 30 minutes away from a Brian Renfroe interview and Next Generation podcast, and we're in a tough situation where there's a lot of turmoil and issues with the offices. Are you feeling that too? And does this detract from all that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that you work to live, you don't live to work. I have been big in my 10 years working as a letter carrier about still keeping my hobbies. I think that it's important to remember that you have hobbies and passions and interests outside of the workplace. And I think that's actually something a lot of letter carriers lose track of. I know a lot of people at my office, they had tons of hobbies, and then, they became a CCA just like I was, and they worked all those hours, 70 hours a week. I was a CCA before they had, the training program where, you could only work so many hours your first few weeks. I had a month, 30 days straight where I worked 30 days in a row, 10 hours a day. And I was losing my mind, honestly. And I just felt like I needed to keep my passions and hobbies, and I needed to find ways to keep doing that. So when I finally became career, that's when I really started podcasting and making content for my social media channels, Fire Lake Media. And yeah, does it detract from the current contract? Yeah, I mean, I like to stay somewhat involved with the union. I don't think I have the mind to be a steward. I just don't think my mind works that way. But I always tell my stewards, if the NALC or anybody ever needs any video work or social media work, I will be right there for them. And yeah, I go to meetings to vote on like important votes too. And I mean, I stay involved in my office too, especially at my local office. Colleen Wood is our chief steward there. And I have a good friendship with Colleen, Terry Utley, and Chris Tanis is our other steward there. And I mean, we've been kind of going through it the last year. We've had some difficult postmasters, I'll say. I don't want to name them specifically, but we at our office it's been a bit difficult. So we've been trying different things to make things better for letter carriers there, for sure.
It's interesting. You're a badass podcaster like me, so that's pretty cool hobby to have. What I know you touched on the subject, but once again, before we move on, what is the podcast? It's about film, and if a carrier is interested in film, what can they find in value from your podcast, and where can they find it?
So it's called A24 on the Rocks. A24, on the rocks, like a drink on the rocks. And yeah, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and basically we take a A24 film, and we've been also doing fun films from the past. Like we reviewed Jaws this year, and then we also blind ranked like our favorite sports films. And I actually have a fellow mail carrier, Ray Neiman, on our fun podcast that we do, and we will watch a film and then review it, and or we will make fun rankings out of films. And it's more of just a fun podcast to listen to. And it would specialize more, I would say, in independent film and horror films, too. We like horror films a lot on our podcast. So, yeah, and it's on the rocks because we're always, we have a drink while we're doing it. I'm actually in recovery. I'm sober about 10 months now, so I don't drink on the podcast anymore. But I'm happy to be open about that, too. I think, sometimes people ask me, why do you tell people that you're sober or in recovery? And I always say, like, it's something I'm proud of. It's not something I should be ashamed of. And so I'm happy to be open about that, too. And so on that podcast, I've also talked about how I'm in recovery from alcohol. So, yeah.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I do enjoy your podcast. I think you've got a really good story about you, and I think you're good at the things you do. For those who don't know, when I put this on my when I put this on my podcasts, there's going to be not my regular introduction. I'm going to play the video that our friend here had made for the last rally we had, and he's a phenomenal journalist. He does really good. If you're into facts, if you're into information, come check out his media. If you're into film, he's a great resource to come and find a fun podcast. And one thing before I ask the final question, is there anything that you would tell carriers? Is there any advice you'd give them, or that, since you've been here a bit, I don't know what year you started. What year was that?
2015, actually. So actually, yeah, it's been over 10 years. So, yeah.
What advice would you give a brand new carrier struggling or trying to fit in? What would you say?
I like what I said earlier. I think don't lose track of your hobbies, your passions, and things that make you happy outside of the workplace. I think if I didn't have that, I would kind of drive myself crazy working here. And yeah, I think that you should work to live and not live to work. I think any worker in any workplace should remember that, because we're not just drones here to just do specifically our job every day. We are people. We have our own interests. We're individuals, and we're all slightly different from each other, but we're all here in solidarity to make a workplace better too.
Yep, and that's some great advice. And if you're like me, there's different kinds of people. If you're like me, and you find yourself in a situation where, basically that he was describing earlier, where you're working those 10 hours days and you're exhausted, you can always also, if you're like me, you can turn into a steward and just have fun filing grievances too. So
yeah,
I'm just joking, but yeah. Before we let you go, we're going to ask the classic question for any investigative interview. Not that this is much of an investigative interview, but is there anything else you would like to add? And can you finally, one more time, plug anything that you would like for carriers to come check out your material so they can find something interesting?
Yeah, I did do a specific postal history video on my channel about USPS on its 250th history, so you could check out that. I actually go into a little bit about how USPS tried to have an email system and it failed horribly. And honestly, I think that's, one of the biggest things that USPS did wrong at the turn of the century is that it went all in on paper mail instead of going in on email at all. And so I have a video, I think it was called An Abridged History of USPS on its 250th anniversary. So yeah, if you're interested in USPS history, that is also on my YouTube channel, Fire Lake Media. And yeah, you can check out my podcast if you like film. It's called A24 on the Rocks.
All right, that's fantastic. It was good to have you on, and
good to have you too.
Yeah, I appreciate everything you do. If you guys want to check out some awesome material, I see this guy's TikToks all the time. I always like them because they're fantastic information, and he's got something going on, and I think it's something for you guys to check out. So hopefully you learned something valuable today. And as always, have a good day.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Have a good day, everybody.
Today's episode was supposed to end there, but I'm so pissed about this Next Generation Carrier episode with Brian Renfroe. If you are a fan of Brian Renfroe, please stop the podcast here. Do not continue. If you don't want to hear me talk politics, union politics, please stop the podcast here. Do not continue. All right, you have been warned. If you don't want to hear about politics, I try and keep a lot of union politics out of my podcast. I have criticized the national people in the past. I do call people out for what they are, and I typically stay away from union politics. But here's your disclaimer. Please shut the podcast off if you don't want to hear me complain about the current national president. You've been warned. I'll give you a couple more seconds. All right. So I am currently on the Next Generation podcast. I'm toward the end, and I have got to address this, man. So Next Generation Carriers had just made a podcast. In fact, it's not over yet. I'm currently on there. And Margot is talking about her last question. But on this podcast, Brian Renfroe had showed up, and it was a joke. Brian Renfroe, first of all, I'm happy to see the John Murphy Renfroe ticket. Just joking, but, he made the comment at the end that he's going to do a ticket with, that he would be willing to work with Brian Renfroe on a special detail, but it was a joke, clearly. But I want to talk about exactly what was going on. I turned it off. It's getting distracting. Today's episode was supposed to be specifically about Eric Kiska, but I'm just pissed off. I'm pissed off and I'm disappointed, and I don't know what else I would have expected. I kind of expected that from Brian Renfroe. He's a fucking joke. He's a fucking joke. But I got on this podcast, and first of all, Brian Renfroe, he only wanted to give them an hour time slot. And this was explained in the comments, and, I think that's bullshit to begin with. The whole time he was doing what he normally does, and he was blinking in Morse code SOS. He couldn't stop blinking it. If you took a drink for every blink he did, I think you'd be dead within a few minutes. If you don't believe me, go look at yourself. Whenever they post it, wherever they post it, go look for yourself. But I'm here more specifically. I want to talk about the very particular question I asked in his response. Although I am also going to highlight some of the comments during the live feed because they were fucking fantastic. But so I got the opportunity to be fit in within the hour. I don't know if I deserve it. There were so many good questions, so many good things. And that's why I'm going to highlight some of the comments so that maybe Brian Renfroe can think about how he's going to answer them. But my question was this. 39 U.S. Code 101 isn't a suggestion. It's our mandate to provide universal service to every address, regardless of cost. Management has the right to manage, but they do not have the right to violate federal law. 39 U.S. Code 101 says that the cost of maintaining the service cannot be apportioned in such a way that would be a detriment to the overall service we provide. Yet, across the country, we are seeing mail intentionally left behind to avoid overtime, breaking our 6-day-a-week promise. When mail is left behind in Roseville, Michigan, because of a restriction of penalty overtime, while other cities are delivering mail into penalty, it is literally apportioning the cost of maintaining the service to different degrees of service standards. Brian, we are the most trusted agency in the government because we deliver through rain, sleet, or snow historically. But that faith is crumbling because of a refusal to pay penalty overtime in certain areas. Why has your administration remained idle even claiming this isn't an issue, while our public image is being sacrificed for some bonuses for management. When we lose the public's trust, we lose our greatest leverage at the bargaining table. Why haven't you filed the national grievance on this issue? And why have we on the workroom floor been left to fend for ourselves, taking a grievance locally that should be a national grievance? And how do you suspect he answered those questions? What do you think he'd said? I'll give you a couple minutes to figure that out. All right, you got your thoughts gathered? Yeah, he pivoted harder than all the runners in my office. It was about the hardest pivots, the most pivots I've ever seen in one fucking second. And you kind of expect it. But essentially he said, first of all, we are not being idle. What? We're not being idle? What do you mean by that? Because my business agent tells me, and not particularly my business agent, but his office, they tell me that this is not an issue, that this is not a grievance. How is that not standing idle? In fact, my business agent's office loves to follow in his footsteps, so I don't understand how this doesn't represent the Nationals' opinion as well, because that's literally what they've said. Additionally, he said that it's not a grievance, and then he just bullshit the entire way. And, you know, it's just Brian Renfroe fashion. I suggest when and where Next Generation Carriers posts that video, go look at it. You'll see Brian Renfroe blinking 1,000 miles an hour to, I think he's trying to let you know in Morse code that it's SOS for him. But I'm going to highlight some of these comments. And just because I highlight them doesn't mean I agree with them. But I think that some of these are funny and some of them are interesting. Can we have a lies told counter put up on screen, please? All right, so that was hilarious. When Brian Renfroe took my question, Rub Kosher had replied, "I will take how to not answer a question for $500, Alex." To which I replied, he has to practice pivoting so that when he goes back to carrying his route, he can quickly become a 204B. People were talking about delaying the mail is a PFP bonus secured and management wins. They always win. We had people saying that he didn't answer why he didn't file the national grievance. It's not a contract violation, he says. It's damn sure is when a carrier delays the mail, though. Well, that's a good fucking point, right? Margot, bless your heart for saying my question. I think you were amazing for doing that. I'm just a little bit pissed off. John Murphy gave me a shout out when that question was asked. He said everyone should give Joshua Strom a subscribe on YouTube. That was awesome. Thank you, John. And let's see. Brian, you said that arbitrator Nolan didn't give a shit about us rallying for a fair contract. Why would we approve an arbitrator who didn't give a shit about us? And even furthermore, why would we be doing the rallying now if last time you said that Nolan didn't care? No one is more annoyed with you than us letter carriers. We have been told not to talk to each other in our office until morning break. Ask him his favorite postal podcast because that's how you really can judge his character. Why didn't you use leverage in the last contract and just slid the whole rejected TA into concession? What's crazy too, instead of USPS holding management accountable and actually trying to stop breaking the contract, what does National do? File an interpretive issue for escalated remedies. Now all grievances with escalated remedies are on hold. That's resolved. It's wild. Let's see. The thing is that there's a lot of disparity between the top and the bottom step. What other ones are there? I'm not going to talk about all of them, but fight like hell, but he's scared of arbitration. Okay, fam. Don't forget, we want to achieve your resignation. Let's see. You conceded everything. What do you mean we didn't give up anything? He said we don't give up anything. How can he even say that? We do give up things all the time. We've given and given and given for the last few decades. It's their turn. There's people talking about reinforce OSHA laws, bro. Every station should provide water bottles to all carriers and have functional water fountains. Mandate it. You had time to chase married women. You didn't care about the contract. So essentially, this was a shit show of Brian doing the thing Brian always does. And what that is talking to himself in circles and saying one thing in the matter of 2 hours. And there's one person said that John Murphy was being more of a national president during this 1 hour time frame than Brian Renfroe has in his entire career. And unfortunately, I can honestly attest that the vast majority of us letter carriers have probably outshined you as a letter carrier and even as a union representative. I think that unfortunately it's time for you to go, Brian. Just do what's best for all of us and resign. I think that it's just Rademacher and Vaca. It didn't work out for them. You're making the same arguments. We need better leadership. I thank you for what you've done or what you think you've done. And I apologize for those folks who are I don't normally make this political. And I know that I have folks that are possibly in support of Brian Renfroe, and it's tough for me to say this, but it's just, it's over. I don't understand why you're even attempting to win back people when you're not even showing us with actions that you have the ability to do the things we need you to do. It's just, hang the towel up, Brian. Hang the towel up. I don't know what else to say. But yeah, today was supposed to be simply about the Eric Kiska episode. I couldn't refrain from commenting on tonight. And literally I started commentating as soon as, before the video even wrapped up. But hopefully you didn't have to listen to my rant in vain. I thank you for staying as long as you did, and it was good having you on. You guys have a good day out there. Stay safe delivering.